Giant stalker, dragon stalker, crypt stalker, demon stalker, rift stalker, grown stalker, crypt stalker, scourge stalker, wind runner. I'm a bony, lead skill hunter, a death dealer, a life stealer. That's just the cost of being.
Welcome to episode 129 of the Hunting Party Podcast. This is Euripides from WoW Insider, out TPS and Call to Auction.
And I'm Darkbrew from thebrewhall.com and the Brewhall on Twitter.
Frosttime is not here today, and I am Alexander from the Hunting Party Podcast and the Torlore Podcast.
You missed an excellent opportunity there. Why is Frosttime not here today, do you ask?
Because Frosttime's super hot sister is graduating from veterinary school.
That's right. We have no reason to suspect that she's super hot or anything else, but because Frosttime's been giving me a hard time about this for the last year, his super hot sister is graduating veterinary school, and he's there to support her in this endeavor. So congratulations, Frosttime's super hot sister.
Congratulations, indeed. So his sister works with pets. How appropriate.
I know, right? It all comes full circle in the end.
I guess it does. All right, and we've got the chat room here today as always, and if you want to participate in the chat room but aren't registered, just go to the little chat window and type fight, porcupine fight, porcupine fight, jeez, good God, in the chat window, and it'll be prompted to register. And joining us this week in the chat room is Keiko, Bad Language, BM Yeager, Shiame, Duskwander, Grickalansis, GT Youngblood, Hunt, Induatez, Pretty God, Scroofy, Slugslinger, Warden, and Warvinny. Good Lee. I understand what he goes through every week trying to pronounce some of those names. You know, the sad part is they're like the same names every week, pretty much.
Well, not every week. We've always got a few new ones, and we've got a few that are there every single week. I keep thinking that some of them should change their name to something really, really funny for Frosttime to have to say, but that's just me. So, if you need to send a question for a Q&A, you can go ahead and just send that to Alexander. You will need to be logged in, I'm pretty sure, but you can just left-click on her name to send her a private message, or if you want us to answer an email, the address is huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com. Also, let's just hop right into the announcements, because we actually have an announcement about the show this week. We are now on YouTube. That's right. If you go to YouTube, you will find a Hunting Party Podcast channel in which we will upload every one of our episodes in video format. Now, unlike a real video podcast, you're not actually getting a video. What you're getting is the MP3 with a picture of the iTunes static image shown throughout the entire thing. And I know it feels like a bit of a ripoff, but YouTube is a very, popular streaming service, and the fact that we happen to do audio only is the only reason we didn't, consider putting it up there. But we've had a lot of requests, and judging by the number of subscribers I've seen over the last couple of days, it seems to be pretty popular. So if that's the kind of thing that would be of interest to you, it's there. Yeah, no, people have taken to it and they started subscribing. And I don't think just doing it like an audio on YouTube is I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, BioWare, the maker of that other MMO, they have an official podcast, which is an audio podcast, and they too release theirs on YouTube. And that seems to be a popular place for people to go and just get any kind of audio visual content, whether it's music or video or just listening to us talk in front of a still image. That said, I know we had someone had volunteered to maybe try and create a background image or something for the our channel itself. So I guess if people are interested in doing stuff like that, we'd be happy to take a look. No guarantees that we'd use it, and even something interesting for the podcast background. Other than our logo would be fine. Or maybe, what might be good is, I think Frosttime has something somewhere, like his Grandpappy Frost image is a dwarf sitting on the chair, shouting out to lots of people. We got to maybe ask him about that. And by ask him, I mean just find the image somewhere and use it. What I was thinking
or we can have Frosttime have a picture of his super sexy hot sister being graduating today. You could use that for this one.
Well,
but I would just like to add that I would like to add that we are not leaving iTunes, we're not leaving Stitcher or any of the rest of that.
Yeah, no, this is adding to the potential number of places you could listen to us simultaneously. We're not taking anything away. However, I was thinking what might be interesting is, because every so often Frosttime, zings me in such a way that I have no response at the time, and I'm one of those guys that thinks 10 minutes later, I should have said this. Well, from now on, it'll be like, I have control over the image, so I can have that image pop up right when he's saying it if I choose to find it in the podcast after you edit it. So let's see what happens with this. I am a very lazy and busy person, so I'm not sure that this will actually go anywhere.
Yeah, maybe that'll be like the question of the day. So what suggestions does the chat room have for the image that we should use behind our audio instead of the Hunting Party podcast logo on YouTube? So what ideas they have, and just send those in, and we'll review those in the Q&A. And I guess as always, Allie will rank them by the type of image she thinks would be best. Although we already know she's in favor of Frostheim's hot sister leading the charge there.
Nice. So we got some news about the game itself. In the beta, there have been a few minor changes, but Aspect of the Beast is now a baseline skill. Fetch, which is something that I had forgotten about until I saw it in the notes, is something that allows us to retrieve loot from a nearby corpse, and it now has a 50-yard range. Let me ask you a question, Darkbrew.
Uh-huh.
Is that something that only hunters can do? Obviously, only hunters can use Fetch, but do many other classes get the ability to loot corpses remotely?
Not that I'm aware of. I know in Cataclysm, engineers got a Looterang.
Looterang, yeah.
Yeah, that they could use, which I never made one, never bothered to use it. This is just kind of an interesting, neat little ability. I don't know how often it will be used. I mean, I guess if you're really far away from a mob that you kill, you could use it. But I mean, they've also implementing this area loot now in beta, which would be really nice. So I mean, you can go up to, if you kill a whole bunch of mobs and you loot one, you loot them all as long as they're in a close enough proximity, and that's just a really nice quality of life change. So I don't know how Fetch will work and how often we'll be inclined to use that over, say, just walking a few feet up to the mobs and looting them all with one swipe. So we'll have to see.
I would like to point out that as far as I know, this is the first thing WoW has stolen from Tor.
Yeah, well, you know what? The Tor stole a bunch of stuff from WoW, like the whole idea of having everybody playing at the same time and everything. But it's also the kind of thing that I think players have asked for, even if they haven't played Tor. And anytime that there's an advance in an MMO, if it's a good feature, it's going to get implemented by other ones too.
Absolutely, I am not complaining.
And what about Aspect of the Beast? So I guess as of last week when we talked about it, that was a glyph, correct? So now instead of being a glyph, it's going to be a baseline skill. And
was it a glyph that gave you a new aspect, or was it a glyph that added that feature to all of your aspects?
I thought
aspect.
What did you think it was? You thought it was a new? I thought it was a new aspect altogether. That's what the glyph did.
Yeah, I remember hearing the announcement of a new aspect, but when the glyph, I guess. Oh, you know what? No, the glyph just made you untrackable in that. I think. I don't know. I'd have to look back in my notes. Anyways, the fact that it's now a baseline skill probably means they took it out of a talent somewhere. I'll bet you the glyph is still there. I'd have to go back and look at the glyph again. Revive Pet is another baseline change, and it now returns the pet to life with 100% of its health, up from 15. Now, I like that.
I like that a lot too.
Yeah.
That's a very nice change.
Now, I wonder if they've taken the same opportunity to fix Summon Pet. When you summon a new pet in, for example, a PvP combat, it's entirely possible that it'll show up with 6,000 health. I wonder if that's something that whether they've had a chance to fix that. It's also entirely possible it'll show up at its original size.
Yeah, that's true too. That may very well happen. But that I'm not sure. But the Revive Pet, 100% health up from 15. That's great. I mean, and that's one of those things where it's just certainly inside of combat, you probably don't have to use that too much. I don't use it too much. I mean, my pets don't die too often. And it's a very painful choice. There are some situations where you have to do it. I mean, it's like a 9 or 10 second cast, so it's a very painful choice to have to make, because that's a lot of DPS time lost. But so is not having a pet. That's also an equal amount of DPS lost.
The worst is when your pet dies right in the beginning of the fight, usually to a bug, and you're just like, oh, really? Fine. But I found myself, back when pets were bugged on Spine, I found myself having to revive him, after the first plate. And then I would just do it during a time when we're DPSing Bloods or Abominations or whatever they're called or something. Sometime when it's important to get your DPS out, but it's more important to make sure that you have your full DPS available for the tendons.
Yeah, Spine and Hagara was another one where if you weren't careful managing your pet, that he could end up losing that.
Yeah, it's true. Another change: the exotic Rhino Stampede now causes the enemy to take 4% increased physical damage rather than 30% bleed, and that's also been changed for the Boar and the Hyena. I suspect that this is actually just part of an overarching change. I think I remember them saying that they want to take out the whole bleed debuff anyways.
Yeah, that's what I think they're doing. Is they're just lining up these pets now to be to provide the new buffs, whatever the 8 buffs and debuffs that they have. So that I think that's all they're doing now is just changing those. Since, like I said, the bleed buffs are debuffs are gone, so they had to give them something.
Yeah, and the 4% was probably the least represented. I haven't actually looked at it since a lot of the changes they've made, but I know right now the 4% is pretty well. There's only a few different specs that bring it. So.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm not really sure who brings it. If it's going to be a common one, if it's one of these things that is it one of the tank debuffs? I don't know off the top of my head now. But it'd be interesting to see, because I know Hyenas, at least with our raids or even our 25, that's one right now because of the bleed debuff that I often find that we're lacking, that we usually have to bring. So, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty. It was a much bigger deal for us back when marksmanship was the top DPS spec because a huge component of their damage was bleeds. Now less so, but it's still a good thing to have it, especially if you have a Feral Dread.
But that was from this week, so I mean, it wasn't a lot of major hunter changes there. So I'd be curious to see if they're getting to the end now with the class changes. I guess at some point they probably have to wrap that up, even before they're ready to release the expansion, because they usually do that like the 5.0 pre-patch and get that out, and that usually has the new talents and those changes, before they release the expansion. And I don't see any reason why they wouldn't want to do that again. So it makes sense that they would want to try and get all the class changes.
When's your prediction for the 5.0 pre-release?
That's a good question, because what did we predict? I was thinking, August time frame maybe for the expansion, and I don't know, maybe things are going to be happening later than that. I mean, although it is only May, but
how long did we get 4.0 before they launched Cataclysm? Not more than a month or two, right?
Yeah, it's usually not more than a month. I think Cataclysm.
Although I think it was quite long for BC. Going into Wrath, it was quite long.
Yeah, Wrath to... I think Wrath...
BC to Wrath, you mean?
Yeah, well, going in... Yeah, well, for Wrath, the Lich King, they did the pre-patch, I think, in October of that year, and then, a month later, the actual expansion.
Oh, it was only a month.
It was only about a month, and I want to say something similar, maybe a little more than a month this time around for Cataclysm. So, but I think that's usually what they aim for, is about a month. Give you about a month lead time.
Well, I guess that would mean if we see this patch, it doesn't feel ready yet. I mean, it certainly doesn't seem ready yet. But if we see the patch, then we can probably guess that we have a month or so left. Although I think that by the time they drop the patch, they've usually announced an actual date for the expansion.
Right, in which they haven't even come close to doing that. So I don't know. Maybe this is going to end up taking, about the same time as their other expansions, and maybe we won't see the whole thing until the fall, rather than earlier in the summer.
Fair enough. So you want to talk about some of these blue posts from Ghostcrawler?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We got a couple of them this week. One was do you want to go over the big one first?
Yeah, you go ahead.
So yeah, earlier, actually it was Saturday, like sometime after we had broadcast the episode, Ghostcrawler popped up on the forums and gave just a big general thread about hunters for Mists of Pandaria, and gave a good indication of kind of the direction they're going and some of the things that they'd like to see. I don't know that we need to read the whole thing, but we can just cover some of the highlights there. So the first thing he talked about was dots and crowd control, and he says we don't want for dots to just ignore crowd control, and sort of talked about it's a test of skill for players to decide when to dot and when to CC. But he said, however, that's not a fair requirement.
Interrupt and break down, sir.
I'm sorry?
I think I said sorry to interrupt and break down the third wall, but I'm having trouble hearing you. Sounds pretty choppy. Ellie, are you experiencing the same thing?
Just a little bit, but not very much.
Ah, okay. Well, anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, someone said it's you that's actually sounding a little choppy.
Oh, good. In that case, I'll shut up and let you talk.
They said dark is good. Yuri is choppy. He said, however, that's not a fair requirement for attacks that you can't prevent, such as piercing shots and MM Mastery. Those probably do need a pause or do no damage to CC'd targets. So in other words, they basically want CC or dotting up a target with, say, like a Serpent Sting or even a Black Arrow or an explosive shot, that type of thing, to be a choice over crowd control. So they don't want to say just because we've trapped something, that if you made the mistake of, like, trapping something in a freezing trap while you've applied Serpent Sting applied, that it would just ignore that and your CC would win out. So they just want us to make some skilled decisions, which it kind of makes sense.
This is really something that's probably more significant, believe it or not, in entry-level PvE. When you're doing dungeons and the dungeons are still hard enough that you're expected to trap, as opposed to just blindly AoE or single target. In that situation, dots break traps all the time.
Yes.
In PvP, typically, people will tend to have a more of a sense of when to use a trap. Like, it's very rare that you'll have to go from DPSing a target to trapping it, like, immediately. But the fact that that is now an option will, of course, make hunters even better at PvP than they currently are, and I'm not going to complain. The best type of PvP CC is obviously a stun. The second best would be something like Cyclone, which makes them immune to damage while they're CC'd, basically. But I think that this is actually going to be a pretty big deal for entry level dungeons.
Yeah, that certainly was the case with the Cataclysm dungeons, especially the heroic mode dungeons or the hard modes. When they first came out and we were completely under geared for them, they really ramped up the level of difficulty. They did say that I think they wanted Mists of Pandaria dungeons to be more like Wrath dungeons, which were just these big AoE fests, just blow through the trash. I kind of like it when you have to do a little bit of thinking and a little bit of CC, and I like a little bit of challenge to some of those trash pulls. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's actually a good thing for the game because it gets you to improve your skills a little bit and use abilities like that.
They can mix them up, though.
They can.
I mean, one of the things I liked most about Cataclysm Dungeons was that you walked in, you AoE'd, and you did a huge amount of damage, and everything just died really quickly. And you felt like you're just like walking through a sea of enemies, just mowing them down. That was a lot of fun. But on the other hand, they could implement, dungeons where you have that, and you have a fair bit of that. But every so often, you come across a trash pack that contains a bit of that, but also contains an enemy that has to be CC'd, or maybe an enemy that has to be dealt with before you can go and they do stuff like that already. But if they spend more time doing that and try and mix together the different types of dungeon encounters between bosses, and I think and calling it trash isn't fair, because in a dungeon, that's really the point of the dungeon crawl.
Sure.
It's not like it's like a raid or something.
Right.
But yeah.
No, but I think it would be good, and I think, maybe see a few strategically placed pulls like that, and maybe less trash overall would probably make for a better dungeon. I mean, I guess that's just their way of ensuring that it might take a certain length of time to complete. I mean, I guess they don't want them to be too fast so that people blow through them and burn through the content too quickly, but I don't know, I think some of their dungeons, they just have way too many trash pulls for their own good.
So one of the things I'd like to see is where specific classes that have specific abilities have the ability to change the nature of the trash. Well, again, I'm using that word, but whatever, trash between the bosses and dungeons. Like, hunters have misdirect, rogues have essentially misdirect, DKs have death grip, stuff like that. Maybe have certain trash packs that if you have a class that has an ability like this, can unlock some different way of doing it. Let's say, for example, there's like in one of the dungeons from this patch you had, or this tier, you had like a huge number of random spread out low hit point mobs that you just had to mow down, but pulling individually. And there's a couple of big mobs mixed in with them. It is right before a boss where you had like 3 groups of like 50 mobs that you could AoE down in one shot. Imagine something like that where a well-placed misdirect would cause a single mob to pass through them all and train them all onto the tank so that they could be easily AoE'd down. And of course, if you don't have a hunter, it just means you'll have to spend a few extra minutes pulling. But if you do have a hunter, then you could do something like that.
Sure.
And they could come up with other mechanics like that for other classes. Like imagine a mob perched up on a ledge that will not path down to you no matter how much damage you do to it unless you death grip it. Otherwise, you have to go around the long way and fight 3 other guys to go up and get him or something.
Sure. Although someone, BM Jaeger, in the chat room was pointing out that there's some classes and people that are actually already soloing some of these Dungeons of Mists of Pandaria. So I'm not sure how difficult they're going to be overall. I remember
they're just gonna tune that, obviously.
I would think so.
Yeah, but that's not the intention. I'm pretty sure the design intention is not to have it soloable right now.
No.
Another one he mentioned in one of his posts, they're tweaking focus regen, and he says it feels a little slow right now. Now that's an interesting comment. I wonder whether that means it feels slow in the sense that you're firing too many focus regen shots in a normal PvE rotation, or whether it feels like you're constantly switching to Fox and having to fire focus regen shots in PvP.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe he just feels like the overall regeneration of focus is low relative to, I guess. Relative to how much you're spending. So, but that maybe he feels like you're not getting enough of our main shots, our focus spending shots into the rotation. That maybe there's too much emphasis on using things like Cobra and Steady Shot. Obviously, last week we talked about how they adjusted the focus cost in some of the shots, presumably to make up for the loss of efficiency. The other thing too, and I don't know where this factors into it. Most hunters are going to go into that expansion with the 4-piece, 2-piece, 4-piece, tier bonus from the most recent set. I guess the tier 13, which is really all about. I
saw the reset was much harsher this time than it was last time.
Which is all about focus regen. Those focus bonus. We've got it pretty good now as far as our focus regen based on those set bonuses. But at some point, we're going to have to drop those.
Yeah.
And, there's going to be an adjustment for a lot of hunters now because that's a lot of focus regen that's going to be just gone. But I don't know if Ghostcrawler feels like they have to make up for that at all in the baseline focus regen. I wouldn't think you would necessarily because, those bonuses are just that. They're bonuses. They're nice to have. But we've had them for a long time now, and people have gotten very used to them.
I don't know. I suspect that it might just be your average player. I suppose your average player now would have those with LFR, but your average player is going to feel like playing a hunter involves hitting certain buttons a certain amount of times. And if the ratio of those buttons changes from patch to patch, that's probably okay. But if you get to a point where no matter how many focus regen shots you fire, you never have time, you never have the available focus to fire fire your big one on cooldown, I think that would be a problem. If you almost never have to hit your focus dump, that's probably okay. But if you if you can never cast your Chimera shot or your explosive shot on cooldown because of you're missing focus, and that's probably a level where they wouldn't want to go. So I guess they just I'd be curious to see what they end up doing with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the whole idea behind it is to try and manage your focus, but yeah, you should be able to hit those big shots, those primary shots every time they're available, and manage it in a way that doesn't involve you just filling up your focus bar. You don't want to get down to some stupid 2-shot rotation where it's Cobra shot, Steady Shot, and then your main shot or something ridiculous like that. So yeah. So we'll have to monitor that, but I guess obviously that's something and I'm glad they don't feel like I'm glad they don't feel like it's in a good place for them because more faster regen is always better.
Yeah.
It's better than hearing them say, no, we think you're getting too much focus and we need to tone it down a little bit. So sounds like they're trying to move it in a direction that we would like it to go.
Yep. The next post that he mentioned was saying Stampede needs to appear at the target or you lose too much of the brief duration with the pets moving there. And we've actually talked about that. He talked about long cooldowns and short duration because it's a huge amount of DPS. Alternately, they could reduce the amount of damage that each pet does, but that doesn't really feel like it delivers the fantasy of opening the stables. What else did he went on to say? Sorry, shuffling papers again. I don't know
Yeah,
how
well,
much
that's
you
all
guys
he had to
like
say
that.
about Stampede. I guess, obviously most of us
Oh, yeah, you're right.
would prefer to see it have a shorter cooldown. We like the shorter cooldown. Longer duration is the change that we would all make. In fact,
That's right.
and double the number of pets since we have 25 potentially sitting in our stable. Let's just bring them all out. But no,
Exactly.
but I do like the fact that they're going to try and address the issue of them, perhaps spawning right on top of the target. I think that would be nice.
Well, one of the problems that Frostheim mentioned in his analysis of this, I forget where he posted it, WHU or maybe WoW Insider, but he was saying that at this level of cooldown, you can't. It doesn't work on readiness, and it doesn't work on in arena. And he's got a pretty good point. 10-minute cooldowns are really that's like heroism. That's not something you can use every fight. I kind of wish, because it seems to me like every time I fight a shaman in PvP, I just get 4 wolves, trying to kill me. It's just, or every time I fight a mage, I get 4 mages trying to kill me, and I don't think that makes them overpowered. And I understand, I don't know what the cooldowns are on those. Maybe I'm just lucky that way, and they happen to use them on me. But I think that our Stampede should be on a similar cooldown as Mirror Image and Ghost Wolves. The Ghost Wolves? What is it called again when the shaman?
It's either Ghost Wolves or Spirit. Well, I think they're Spirit Wolves.
Spirit Wolves, yeah. Ghost Wolf is a travel form or whatever.
Yes.
So
no, that makes complete sense. Like you said, right, 10 minutes is a long duration. He
said on progression. I specifically remember Frost saying on progression, 5-minute fights, you're not going to get to use it every attempt. That's a pretty good point. I personally would be willing to accept a slight modification on the amount of damage the pets are doing, just to accommodate having a shorter cooldown. I don't think it would break the fantasy of having all your pets out at the same time.
No.
It's awesome, but I don't think it's that bad.
No, I don't think it's that bad at all. And like you said too, and keep in mind, if you guys wipe on an attempt, you lose that heroism debuff, so you can actually use it again.
Yeah,
You'll have it available.
and they might do that too.
Attempt.
Maybe a death would reset your cooldown on this.
I would be surprised if they did that, but that would certainly be an option. That would make sense. It would certainly benefit us in a raid situation.
You have 3 battle reses. You could have a hunter throw himself into the fire 3 times. Get 3 stampedes. Makes
There
sense
you go.
to me.
And that's exactly why it won't happen.
Yeah.
So,
That was all he said about Stampede, I guess.
yes. Yeah, he went and talked about traps as well. He said, we want traps to be good CC. Traps are one of the signature hunter mechanics, and we'd rather make them good than just let players ignore them and do all their CCs with shots.
I see.
So I don't know.
It feels like he's talking about 5-mans here.
Yeah, or just our crowd control in general. That's one of the things, we're the only class that kind of has to do a proximity, in terms of trapping a target. Like everyone else can just target something, like a mage can just target a mob, hit polymorph, and that's it. And same with the druids and all the others. We're the only ones that kind of have to hope he stays still or kind of figure out a trajectory or a path where it might be going. But you know what? It's been like that for 8 years now, and so I don't know that it necessarily needs to change. Obviously, it's easier and more convenient if you just had a shot that could CC something.
And we do have that a little bit with Wyvern Sting.
Right.
But I understand where he's coming from here. But I think that all people who complain about traps are complaining about it for one of 2 reasons. Well, you know what? They're mostly complaining about it because of how hard it is to make something walk into your trap, basically. And I think that can be balanced around. If they give us a couple of different... right now, Trap Launcher just lets us place the same trap we would put at our feet, but someplace else. I think that we would actually be better served by Trap Launcher just applying the debuff of the trap directly to our target, or whatever, or mouse over focus, you know what I mean? That would probably make more sense than having the ability to scatter your traps around in a 30, 40 yard radius from wherever you're standing there, stealth. Because, it just, the whole concept of a launcher, it doesn't. I think that would balance it a little bit, but I think that would also unbalance it a little bit, because at that point we would basically have a shot that we could use to just trap something. It would have to come with a disadvantage. I would be willing to accept a reduced duration or reduced effects or some sort of gimp if I'm not willing to use it myself. And I'm also willing to that would also mean that for those hunters who have the ability to put a trap at their feet and have it be useful, which is not an easy skill to acquire, I can tell you that. You need to know where whatever you need to have trapped is going to move, and that means that if it's an NPC, you need to have done it before. If it's a player, you need to be smarter than him or her. And in that situation, having an advantage for being able to put a trap at your feet and have it go off is something that I would actually find okay. If Trap Launcher no longer allowed me to launch a trap, within anywhere I could put a targeting reticule, and instead allowed me to apply my trap directly to my target. Maybe one of the things that I could accept, at least for PvE, is you can only use that type of trap launcher if you're in camo. Mm-hmm. You can only apply a trap launcher directly if you're in camo, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Or go ahead.
The other thing is, at that point, you could almost have three options. You could have the trap launcher the way it is now, maybe the trap applier that you can only use in camo or something.
Although, I was going to say, having the trap launcher being at least toggle on and off like it is now is very nice, and that'll certainly
that's a nice quality of life. Definitely
make using it easier. But as BM Yeager also pointed out in the chat room, he's like, we are kind of have it backwards relative to other classes where we have non-targeted CC but targeted AOE, which I'd sort of forgotten about that with multi-shot, where we actually have to have a target. Everyone else can just blast away their targets in an area, and in some ways. I mean, what they did with multi-shot and serpent spread, was nice, but I still kind of missed volley a little bit, that you could just have that little reticule and blast in an area. I kind of like that effect. I didn't even mind it being channeled.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll ever give us something back like that. I mean, at a certain... Yeah.
It was much easier AoE, that's for sure.
Yes.
And it made a lot more sense. I know volleys obviously didn't really make much sense, but I think people liked it and were okay with that. The fact that they had a gun equipped and were just shooting arrows from the air, I really had no problems with that.
Well, they could make it, two different animations. A volley with your arrows would look like the old volley, and a volley with your gun would look like a bunch of bombs exploding, as if you're shelling poor innocent herd of sheep.
Yeah, I mean, volley did not, mess with my sort of suspension of disbelief using my hunter, which is actually something Ghostcrawler addresses with his next topic.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So, you want to read that one since you've got it?
I'll let you. I'm just worried about lagging out again.
Fair enough. Well, anyway, he was talking about expertise, and he says we're still looking at expertise, and he says dodge and running lots of PvP tests right now. So we do think it's a bit disingenuous to argue that melee are always behind their targets in PvP. Just ask any backstabbing rogue or shredding druid. It says overall we're still comfortable with the idea of ranged attacks able to be dodged. And he says it's a little weird to argue any of this stuff based on reality, but heroes so awesome that they could dodge arrows or bullets certainly exist in literature and cinema. If you can leap through the air towards your foe or backwards in case of a hunter, shield block a giant, or cast a fireball, then being able to dodge a shot shouldn't be the thing that breaks suspension of disbelief. Yeah, I guess I'll give him that.
Yeah.
As far as this whole suspension of disbelief, yes. I mean, that's not really a big deal. But expertise, I mean, this is going to be interesting. This is, another stat and another thing that we're going to have to, I think it's going to be required that we have a minimum amount, and we're going to have to go figure out how that works with the rest of our stuff.
Yeah, well, it's not a requirement. It's just going to be that it's going to be a higher itemization value, or it's going to be a higher DPS value than Creator Haste, presumably.
Sure.
Although there are certain cases, I think, for classes that currently need expertise where that's not the case. I know in PvP, of course, expertise is sometimes not preferred in favor of crits because crits mean you're more likely to do a large amount of damage in a short time, whereas expertise means you're more likely to do a smaller amount of damage but more consistently, making it easier to heal through. But, and that's just because he was talking about it in PvP, but obviously in PvE it's a pretty simple equation. It's whatever amount of damage you've done at the end of the fight. If that would have gone up if you had been expertise capped, then by all means go reforge expertise. And it does amount to a reduction of our, the fact that we now can be dodged is a reduction in DPS. The fact that we now have to reforge into expertise in order to avoid being dodged means that it's, that's that much less crit that we'll have,
Exactly. So, but I guess the real implication here for that is PvP. No, I mean more so than anything else. I mean,
he chose that as an example, and I'm curious as to why that was the one that he picked for PvP, because this basically applies to both PvP and PvE. I don't see dodges in PvP as any more significant than dodges in PvE. Special attacks that, most hunters don't hit cap for PvP. They get 5%, and they understand that, there are classes that they will occasionally miss, and that means you'll occasionally miss your Chimera shot, which sucks, or you'll occasionally miss a scatter shot, which really sucks, or worse, a silencing shot. And now that traps inherit our physical, our physical? I think they changed traps to not be resistible if you're hit capped anymore. But even then, traps still occasionally get resisted by characters with a higher than average resistance or something like that. That's a situation where I guess it's a bit of a gimme. I don't think this has that much more of an effect on PvP than it is on PvE. Anyways, he specifically mentioned if it's an undue burden for PvP, that's another thing. And he made the most awesome pun ever. Arguing that it's not realistic is a bit dodgy.
Right, yes, that was very clever. I enjoyed that bit too. Yeah, but he did say, like you said, the jury is still out. So this is something that they're obviously paying attention to, and be curious to see what, if any, adjustments that they actually do to it. I don't know. I think we're going to have expertise. I don't think they would actually undo that. Although, they have, if something isn't working, they're not afraid to just scrap it and revert back to the way things are now. We saw that with the proposed survival changes in Black Arrow. So all that they tried it, they didn't like it, we didn't like it, and now it's back to the way it is.
Yeah, but this is a pretty tangible benefit for them. They will spend less time balancing items because now we'll share, a fraction more of our items with classes that do need expertise. Like right now, we can share, an agility crit mastery ring with a whole bunch of people,
right.
But an agility crit expertise ring, not as much. So
rings and cloaks, I guess, are the kind of thing where we would probably now compete more with some of the other classes, and then obviously our gear will now be pretty much perfectly in line with the enhancement shaman gear. So.
Yeah, it just means that they have to do a little bit less work. If they can make this work on a systematic level, they have to do a little less work. And I'm not actually worried that this is going to be a huge nerf to our DPS, because right now that statement is without meaning. We have no prior comparison. We've been level 85 in a completely different system. We'll be level 90 with nothing to compare. Obviously we'll be level 90 and we'll be able to say, yeah, if I had 8% more DPS, I'd have 8% more DPS, but that's not really a valid comparison. You compare against, other classes, maybe other classes that can fill multiple roles and other pure DPS classes, and that's what you do your comparison based on. And obviously if there's a delta there, if there's something that's not the way it should be and hunters are getting passed over, then they'll fix it. And we've seen them do that this expansion. There are times that hunters, there are very few hunters in serious rating, and the first heroic, what was it? We had the guy on just fairly recently. Anyways, one of the world's first guilds, they didn't have as many hunters as they did, rogues, for example, or whatever. And, they made a couple of changes, and they ended up buffing survival so much that all of a sudden, bam, hunters are back on top with a lot of other pure DPS.
Yeah, they sure are.
Obviously not the absolute top. We don't have legendaries. Speaking of which, this isn't in the show notes, but I want to say I think it's time for hunters to get a legendary. We haven't had one since legendary sucked. Not to say that the actual legendary item sucked, but the process of acquiring a legendary sucked in BC. It wasn't something that felt epic. It just felt really, really rare. and spawned more arguments and disagreements than any other that ever put into this game.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, I think the way that they do legendaries now can obviously be tweaked to be made better, but it's a darn sight better than it was in BC. I don't like the idea of 25 mans being a legendary farm where you can equip 4 or 5 of them per guild. At that point, you just have people rolling alts of that class just so that they can say they have a legendary. I like the idea of a fairly decent 25-man guild being able to produce 1, maybe 2 during an active expansion or an active tier, and then be able to go back and produce another 1 or 2 afterwards once they've got even better gear from the next one. And I also like the fact that legendaries are not ridiculously legendary. They're not so much better than actual droppable weapons for like more than 2 tiers. And for rogues, just 1. This is the only one that there's going to be an advantage. There'll be blue drops at level 87 that are probably better than the.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we don't know how many. Let's assume for a moment, or that Mists of Pandaria is going to have the exact same number of content patches as Cataclysm, which means there'll be 3 tiers there. So obviously, if the hunters, and we can probably figure that Blizzard seems to like weapons. So it would probably be a ranged weapon, maybe a bow or a crossbow, because we know they hate guns at this point. So I guess we'd want to have our legendary come from that second tier, whatever the middle one is, kind of like what they did with the staff for the caster.
Well, I would be perfectly fine with having the legendary in the third one. That just means for that, because don't forget the third one is always the longest. So I mean, you'd have that much longer to be awesome.
I guess you would, but on the other hand. The legendary you'd get in the second tier, would certainly serve you well through all of your progression in the third tier. It's probably not going to be outdated. Plus, that second tier is going to become easier, which means that legendary will be ultimately easier. And with like the 5,000 hunters that we have in our guild, we can always go back and add that second tier raid to our content and make sure everybody gets one.
Well, I think, if I remember correctly, they're planning on continuing allowing Real ID raid groups for N-1 tiers, like whatever the current tier is.
Right.
No, but the last one, yes. And if they continue on that path, then in theory, any hunter that has enough people in other realms or is willing to beg, borrow, or steal enough people in other realms that could help them, run them on off nights or whatever, will be able to get a. Yeah, I could buy into that. Having the ability to do cross-realm, for example, they have a site called Open Raid or something like that allows you to just go pick up, create pickup groups with people you've never met before using the real friend ID. And now with gamer tags, it's even more secure. They won't need to know your real name.
Yeah, I mean, between the Raid Finder and now they just announced for the beta and something they're going to do for Pandaria is this sort of cross-realm zones.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. And it sounds like they're going to be doing that for a lot more zones than we think. I think they're redesigning the outdoor world. Obviously, every capital city is going to be unique to a realm, but every time you walk into a zone, I suspect that the majority of zones that are underpopulated are going to be shared between certain realms, and the ones that are overpopulated are going to be split up into shards. I don't play any other MMOs. I almost don't play any other video games, period. But I do know of one MMO that had that concept, and I don't remember the name of it, but a friend of mine was all excited and telling me how much better it is in World of Warcraft because it had this concept of, you know what it was? It was that, the one that James went to play, Alpha something, or like where you could become like an angel and fly around or something.
I have no clue.
I don't know. Whatever.
But the idea that we're going to have more cross-realm type stuff, I mean, this is the kind of thing, who knows if they might evolve raiding more in terms of making it easier just to do cross-realm raiding in general. I think, they're looking for raid is already cross-realm, is it not? I mean, I don't think that's just pulling from your own.
Yeah, no, that's cross-realm.
That's cross-realm, so.
I don't like that. I don't like cross-realm where you don't have to know the people. Or I don't like cross-realm where you're not allowed to choose who you play with. Because anytime you have that environment, they need to create a system that's so strict that it enforces good behavior.
Right,
as opposed to having the group enforce good behavior.
But I definitely like the idea of just the real friend. I'd like to see maybe them set it up so that you could just, have friends on other realms that don't necessarily have to be connected to the real ID in some way, that you could just invite them to be part of your raid group. I think that it seems to be that's sort of the direction they're heading a little bit. But
yeah. I think this is probably using the same underlying technology as Well, I'm not sure. I know the underlying technology behind Battlegrounds and LFR are essentially completely separated servers that have absolutely nothing to do with the world server that you live in, and that server can be connected to by players from any realm. But this is a situation where you have sort of a continuous like world between zones, and all of a sudden, bam, you see a player from another realm. That kind of technology could be used to greatly unify a lot of different parts of this game. Right now, we're broken up into, a number of realms that seemed appropriate when the player base was as high as it had ever been. And as the player base starts to, I'm not going to say shrink, but definitely stagnate, and it kind of bumps up for new expansions and then quickly drops off as people go and say, yeah, this is very, very much like the old expansion. Then the number of realms that we have feels too big. It's like these
Right.
big empty halls filled with a couple of people spamming trade. I think that they could benefit and make the experience a lot more MMO type
Yep.
if they were to find a way to unify the technology so that you could, maybe not for every facet of the game, but at least from more than they currently have, interact with other players.
Yeah,
Like,
it's,
more like Eve than this.
right. And it's the kind of thing too where they could, bring players together without feeling like they have to, shut down realms and merge
Yeah.
servers and things like that, which always seems to a lot of people view as being sort of like the death knell for any
Yeah,
MMO. Once you
Exactly.
start
And
doing
there's gonna
that,
be like churn every time that happens, and people leaving, maybe resettling later. But creating technology that allows players to play together more frequently in more different ways, I think is probably a winning solution for them.
I agree.
So,
We had one more Ghostcrawler post from the other day too. So why don't we go through that? Because that
Go ahead.
would be kind of quick. Anyway, so he talked about porcupines and silkworms, and Ghostcrawler leads off his post by saying, "Fight, porcupine, fight." And he said, and this is the context here was somebody in the beta noticed that silkworms and porcupines were tameable. They were classified as boars, and I think that classification went away, and there was some concern that we wouldn't be able to tame them anymore. And what Ghostcrawler was saying is, hey, we decided these animals shouldn't be boars anymore, but they will be tameable. He says silkworms can be worms, and porcupines can be their own family. And then he goes on to say, fight, spirit, porcupine, fight. So it sounds like we don't know what abilities or things the porcupines are going to have, but they're going to be tameable, and it's going to be their own family. And that last line there indicates to me the potential of a spirit.
it might be an actual spirit porcupine.
Yeah, that they may introduce a spirit beast version of a porcupine.
That's hilarious. I like his methodology when people are just like, "Hey, we noticed that these things are tameable. What's up with that? Are they boars or what?" And it's I feel like not necessarily the Ghostcrawler of 3 years ago, but definitely the Blizzard of 3 years ago would have been like, "Whoops, it is now an alligator." Or it's a shapeless cube or something, and sorry about that. I guess a couple of you have rare parrots, but it'll all be reset on the next wipe.
Mhm.
The fact that they're now just like, what is it? Does this in any way imbalance the game? No, and we've seen a positive reaction towards porcupines, so fine, give them porcupines.
Yeah,
I like their methodology.
yeah, I agree. I haven't tamed one yet, but it sounds like they're actually somewhat smallish pets once you tame them. So they almost like a critter-like quality, in the same way like the seagulls were kind of smallish. So
I love the seagull.
people like having
And I am absolutely going to be filling up my stable with seagulls for every time I cast Stampede. And then using Murder of Crows at the same time. Oh, no, I can't. But whatever. Using one or the other.
I don't know. The Stampede is just an ability. I mean,
I thought they were on the same...
No,
they were
that's
okay.
Call Beast you're thinking of, I believe.
Yes, you're right. I was thinking of Call Beast. Eventually, I will get this all sorted out in my head. So, did you want to go over any listener Q&A before we did some emails?
Well, we just had the one this week from Warvinny, and all he suggested was having them put a picture up of each one of our mains, I guess, as far as the background image.
Okay. That'd be pretty boring. They're all, I suppose they're a little different. You probably look very similar to Frostheim. You're a dwarf.
Well, it's a dwarf. I think our tunes look very different, actually.
Oh, yeah? Do you partake in, what do you call it, transmog?
Yeah, I do transmog. The only thing is I've transmogged are my headpiece into the pair of engineering goggles, the first
Oh,
few
nice.
ones from Burning Crusade. So I use those, and I think like Frost has one of these gray bearded dwarves, whereas I've got the dark beard, the buzz cut, the flat top buzz cut,
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
and I've been running with that look ever since they did the barbershop.
Your phone's ringing again. Awesome. Well, let's go
And
through an email
I
then.
have, with Warveni's suggestion is, I'm the only horde, and I'm a blood elf female. I feel that the horde is going to be vastly underrepresented in this suggestion.
And you're only horde when you're playing on your trader. When you're playing on your actual character, the character in the WHU, then you're alliance. Like a lot of the good people.
Yes, but Alexander with an E is always horde, and she was my first hunter. So,
Oh, well, okay. I talk a big game. I don't actually mind the horde.
Alexander with an O, that is my dwarf hunter, yes.
Okay. Let's go ahead and read one of these listener emails here. G'day, Frost, Dark Brew, Ali, and Yuri. If Yuri is there, it's ironic that Frost is not today. I am a hunter from Australia with 285 hunters. Sounds like our kind of guy. One is in the WHU Guild. Okay. Listen to the show. Was wondering what your thoughts on how spirit beasts will operate in mists. Once we have the ability to select a role for our pets, like DPS or cunning, does that mean that we will have the ability to make a spirit beast a non-BM pet? I've been hard at work taming all but one. Now the expansion is winding down, and I was hoping that I didn't have to run them as BM in Mist, since I really love some of the models. Thank you for your thoughts. Tell Yuri's sister to stop calling me. I'm going to start creating a blacklist for you people.
Right. No, the answer is no. I mean, the spirit beasts, exotic pets are here to stay. I mean, that's something that's going to be beast mastery only, and spirit beasts are exotic pets, so you will have to be BM in order to tame and use them. But you will be able to make your, spirit beast into a tenacity or cunning pet, as you will with any of them. So that's not going to so you have that advantage. But no, you'll have to be beast mastery to use spirit beasts.
Yeah. And I kind of don't mind that. Beast Mastery has a huge contingent of people who just play it because that's their favorite spec.
Right.
We all tend to think of this from a competitive standpoint of what is the way that I can do the most DPS aside from running a Spore Bat, and what is the way that I can be the best at PvP or whatever. And I don't think everybody who plays WoW plays that way. I think most people, like at least a large portion of hunter players, start from the perspective of what kind of hunter do I want to play first, and then what's the best thing I can do with that hunter playing the way I want to play. And I think that people who write on the internet tend to not be like that because of, or some of them are, but I think that there's a bigger sampling of people who are really min-maxing as much as possible to try and accomplish some sort of goal, whether it's raiding or PvP, and those people are the ones who tend to write the most. That said, even BM currently, at least, is very, very viable in endgame PvP, like serious PvP, not just screwing around for fun. And there are fights where it's viable for PvE, specifically heroic spine. So I imagine that we'll find places that you can pull out your spirit beasts for more than just parading around Dalaran in Mists or whatever the new Dalaran is in Mists. And I certainly hope that's the case because BM is an incredibly popular spec, and a lot of hunters, even when they got nerfed to the ground, quote unquote, continue playing. They're like, I don't care. This is my spirit beast. Look at this. Look at this thing.
Yeah, no, the spirit beasts are fun. And same with the other exotic pets. They're mostly there for show. They usually get an extra ability, so they're not useless either. But most of the things that they bring, can be gotten elsewhere. Although I think that the Ancient Hysteria from the Core Hound is only limited to that pet, but I think some of the other abilities that they have can be found in non-exotic versions, like the crit buffs and those types of things.
Yeah, that's it. I kind of like that, actually. Ancient Hysteria, I've forgotten about that. I don't actually have a BM spec right now, and you can't actually use Ancient Hysteria in most forms of PvP. But that's one of those things where if you're doing a 10-man and you don't have anybody else, like any mages or shims or whatever, then you can absolutely go BM, take whatever loss of DPS you think that is based on your BM spec and your ability at BM. And of course the encounter that you're playing on, and then all of a sudden bring 45 seconds of enormous 40% or whatever heroic speed to your raid. So that's something I kind of appreciate. Anyways, I think we're running up in an hour. Do you guys want to do our outro or?
Sure.
Anything else you want to talk
Sure.
about?
No.
All right. So you have been listening to episode 129 of the Hunting Party podcast. This is Euripides from OutDPS, WoW Insider, and Call to Auction.
And I'm Dark Brew from thebrewhall.com and the Brew Hall on Twitter.
Frostheim
I'm
from
Molly.
Warcraft Hunters Union. It cannot make it today because his incredibly hot sister is graduating from veterinarian school.
And I'm Ollie Sonder from the Hunting Party podcast, the Torlore podcast, and I'm going to steal Euripides' line. Check us out on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, and our RSS feed. Dear reader, links available on the show notes.
That is amazing. You even ad-libbed the YouTube part. Thank you.
I did, and that's why I stole it, because
I would have remembered. No, I wouldn't have remembered. If you like us, please don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes, or I guess YouTube now, especially one where you mention how many spore bats you keep stabled, or how uncommonly hairy Frostheim's wrists are.
All right, stay thirsty, my friends, and remember to drink your Dark Brew lager.
Don't forget to spear or neuter your feral druid.
and don't forget to pay your dues.
Now that was a blatant theft right there. But it worked. Deathwing is a sport bat.
All right.
I don't know if you can hear in the background, but my kids are literally exploding with rage at the moment, so I
Yeah.
should probably get going and help my wife.
Yeah, same here. I gotta go see what the
All
phone
right.
calls and everything are all about. But a good show this week, so we'll see everybody here back next week with probably another beta update. They seem to
Probably,
be
yeah.
putting out these patches once a week now, pretty regularly, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys. Talk to you next week.
All right.
Viper to cheetah to dragon hawk. No time to waste, cause I can jump shot. BM, MM, and SV. I can rock out any tree. Never worried about my threat, cause I've got FD and misdirect. Catching loose mobs in my traps. I never miss, cause I am hit capped. Cause I'm the hunter, not the marked. I'm the fighter, not the spark. I'm the kiter, not the kite. I'll top meters every fight. Raiding in a cave, dealing death. Just me, my gun, and my trusty bed. Now let's begin with Illidan, Osirian, and Gil'jadan, Magdamar, Asgalor, Gruul, Cthulhu, and Razorgore, Onyxia to Ragnaros. Which one have we killed the most? Kel'Thuzad to Malagos. We even killed Akama's ghost. Feels like we're getting close, all that running as a ghost. Anubarak, Yogg-Saron, Therian, Sartharian, Megthuradon, Saphiron, Lucifer to Sulfuron, Archaon,